All right, I think we can get going and people will join as they join. I think folks know both of us, but I'm Asad Surket. I'm the relatively new editor-in-chief of Elle Decor. I started last September, September 2020. I'm actually in the office today, which is a rarity in these times, as we all say these days. And it is a real treat to be joined by our interiors editor, Bebe Haworth. Do you want to say a little bit about your role, Bebe?
Yeah, sure. So I have been working at Elle Decor for about a year and a half or so. Very excited to work with Assad and on carrying out his vision for Elle Decor. And I work primarily on our project submissions that come in and sorting through all of those and working with Assad and the team on getting them in the magazine and on the website.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, there are lots of things that go into that, and we're happy to try to pull the curtain back on some of that and demystify this process. I know that people are always asking what we look for, how we assess projects, what we're actually thinking about when we have our kind of team meetings about all of the amazing work that we are so lucky to be given to review. So we figured we'd talk through a few different categories and really try to hit some of the most frequently asked questions and the things that we think folks on this call should really be aware of. But I wanted to start before we delve into all of that by just talking about my vision for the magazine and kind of what I'm up to as the new leader of the magazine and what we've been talking about as a team of editors. I'm sure that folks on this call have heard me say this a million times, so excuse me if it's a repetitive moment for you, but I'm so invested in telling design stories that have yet to be told. That could be a designer whose work has not been seen in many of the magazines like ours. That could be someone working in a place that is not on a coast in the US or in a major international city that is frequented by American travelers. That could be somebody who is working at a really small scale on a bungalow, on a series of rooms, on just one single project for somebody who has a big residence, but their second home is a plywood lined cabin in the woods in upstate New York. And I'm really thinking about ways to surprise and delight our readership by bringing them stories with journalistic integrity, visual interest, and a real sense of the unexpected and a sense of freshness. I think every magazine editor, that's whether they're in design or fashion or food, that's their kind of mantra, to bring something that feels new and unexpected and interesting to their readership, whether that is a print readership or digital readership. And I am so invested in meeting with groups like this one, with the Black Interior Designers Network, because I feel and know through my experience of 10 years as an editor that Black designer stories are not told enough in these types of magazines, in the magazines that I'm that I've worked in and through my career, and that I'm so lucky to be able to helm in this specific moment. So I'm excited to demystify this process, just to share the information, and also it is beneficial to us too as we work to make the magazine feel richer and more deeply reflective of everything happening in the design industry, in every corner of the design industry worldwide. So I hope that this is useful. And if you have questions, please do leave them in the chat box, the Q&A box, not the chat box, the Q&A box. And toward the end of the session, we'll open up that Q&A box and we'll get to some of those questions if we don't answer them as we go.
Yeah, hopefully.
So Bebe, I know you had some sections that we chatted about breaking things down. And so do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the question that I am often asked the most, and I'm sure you are too, is essentially how to pitch a project. And there's, not a real straight answer to this, but there are definitely some different aspects that I think are important to know and think about when sending a project to be reviewed. And, most importantly, to send in all of your information and images and in a clear, concise way, to have everything in one place, because we get so many projects from all around the world. And then, of course, essentially the who, the what, and the where for every project. I know when we're looking at all of these projects, we're always keeping in mind geographic diversity and, keeping in a range of talent, and it's important to have all of that information. And then, background information, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything you can tell us, for example, about the clients. And I know obviously many clients want to remain anonymous, but even that information is really useful because we'll often follow up and say, does this client need to be anonymous? Can they be photographed for the story? Will they participate in an interview? Even if they need to be kind of relatively anonymous, but will participate in an interview and just not be named, that actually is really useful information as we craft a story, because really at the end of the day, our stories are about your work and not the client. You know, the story is about how your space helps support, or your work in this client space helps support the way that they live their life. But design is the story, and we want to make sure that we have as much access to the information about the design solutions for whatever their specific problems at home might have been. You know, we want to make sure that we have that intel. And so it is really useful to be able to speak with your clients when that's possible.
Yeah, and also so often I feel like we get projects and there will be a little tidbit of background information about the homeowner or the house or whatnot, and it'll give us cause as to, you know, let's take a look at this again, or look
Or
at it.
it excites us. You know, it's like
Yeah,
sometimes those narrative tidbits about a client or a homeowner and the way that the client and the designer worked together to solve a specific design problem is the way in for us journalistically, because we're telling stories about interiors and design, but we have a real vested interest in telling stories that feel like there is a through line, like there's a narrative, and we can identify a problem and what the design solution was. So occasionally, you know, that's the thing that sways me. I
yeah,
see the work and I'm like, that's a beautiful space. It seems so kind of harmoniously balanced in terms of color and pattern and the way that the sunlight comes into the space. And that can be great. We see a lot of projects that are really strong in all of those departments. And the thing that can really tip the scales for me, and I know Bebe, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, is feeling like there is a narrative current that makes us understand why the space looks the way it looks.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then of course, you know, the photos. We want to see the project,
Yes.
and that we get photos in all different ways, from WeTransfer and Dropbox, PDFs, a couple snaps just to get an idea of a project. And you know, a lot of designers often ask, "Do we need to shoot this professionally?"
And the answer is no, you do not need to professionally shoot your own projects. We'll handle that if we get to that stage in the process. Really, what we need to see is just rough photos that give us a sense of the space and how each individual room interacts with the next, you know, beyond a hallway or in a space where there are multiple rooms. I know obviously there are projects that are much smaller and it's a studio apartment or it's a smaller space, but when there are multiple rooms, we'd love to understand the relationship between and among those rooms. And they can be shot with an iPhone. I think that that's a thing that kind of gets lost in um, your enthusiasm as designers and our enthusiasm as editors. Like we can start from a place of kind of rough material in the way that you would on a renovation project for a client. You know, we're really just looking at whatever material you have, and we assess them with an open mind because we understand how much kind of magazine magic goes into zhuzhing things up for photo shooting and making all of that happen. And you know, also it does democratize the way we assess submissions and who we review submissions from when we say, and I've dedicated all of us to this, to say it doesn't need to be professionally shot already. You know, that's a thing that we are going to handle as the magazine editors who are working on the story.
Right.
And so even if it's just that you've breezed through with your iPhone or Android, we're happy to look at your mobile device photos of a project because those can often give us really valuable information.
Sometimes we get videos too. I mean,
Yes,
which are also helpful.
which
And
I love. I mean, and I have a feeling saying this now is going to mean we start getting lots of videos, and you don't have to send the video, but we do often get them from people who took them for vendors or artisans they work with who needed a sense of the space.
yeah,
And so they send us a video with a narration that has nothing to do with their submission, their editorial submission. And that is usually really useful as well if it is part of the package, and it doesn't have to be.
completely, completely. And then you touched on this a little bit, but always whether or not the homeowner is going to be anonymous. And not just that, but I think so often we'll ask, will they participate in a photo shoot as well down the line? And also whether or not we can go back and shoot this project if we're interested. I think those are all important to know.
Yeah, and on the anonymity front, obviously there are clients who want to support the incredible work that you have done for them and with them. And so they're happy to participate in a story to that extent because they understand its usefulness for your businesses. And
Mhm.
that's, I mean, look, that's a very good friend to have. That's a very good client to have. And it could be that that client's participation is limited entirely to participating in an interview. So they speak with our writer, one of our editors on staff or a freelance writer that we work with on the story, and they don't need to be named. We don't need to say necessarily what profession they're in even, but just to have that feedback about what the working relationship was like with you as a designer, and them as a client is really useful in us telling the story and doing it justice. But of course, we love when a client and a homeowner is willing to be photographed. I mean, it's great to be able to see them in the space. You get a sense of scale by having, them in their own space. You get a sense of their style, in terms of what they're wearing in the photo or how they choose to position themselves on their new favorite armchair or sofa. And that really does add another layer to how we tell the story, and also how your design work is received by people who were not as deeply involved in the process as all of you are, as these things go.
Right. Completely. I love seeing, who these people are that are living in these incredible spaces designed by, all of you basically.
Yeah.
Um,
One other thing I will add really quickly to that too is sometimes, right, a client is like, I will not be photographed, but I'll participate in an interview. Great, good to know. It can often be useful to have a portrait of the designer in the space. And this is a thing, I
yes.
mean, I did not invent this, but I do really like pushing it as an option because it's so nice to see a designer, and sometimes with the client. Recently actually um, in reviewing photos for our summer issue, which we just finished, we saw some great photos of a client with the designer, and I loved seeing them sitting on the same sofa looking to camera, and you kind of understood that they had had this amazing relationship through the year plus long process of putting this home together. And seeing a designer in the space can also be really amazing. So if you have an opportunity to have your portrait taken on the day that we're photographing a space, so that you're having professional photos taken, if you decide to do that, it is always great to see the designer in the space as well.
Completely. And I think that goes for both, in the magazine and on the website, all of this really,
Yes.
but being able to share, a little bit more about the designer and the space with portraits is always wonderful.
For sure.
And then what's helpful is when people understand or show a level of engagement with what we're doing and how a project might fit in the magazine. I love hearing feedback from designers and people in the industry about what we're doing at the magazine and what they're doing and how these two can relate. And I think that that's helpful.
Yeah, me too. And I mentioned this a bit ago, but we're telling stories about our world through the lens of design. So if it is that you've seen a story that really resonated with you and you feel like a project you're working on is going to further that story or enrich the story we're telling in the magazine, we'd love to hear that connection that you have made. It could be that we have not even made that connection already.
Yeah,
And that in you saying it to us, we actually are able to knit what your work is and what our work is together in a way that is mutually beneficial, which is always really nice.
completely. Or see, trends develop in a way that we haven't noticed before. And absolutely. And then, going back to, I think we touched on this a minute ago, but transparency and clarity about projects from the get-go is always important. I mean, knowing whether or not a homeowner can be included, or maybe they can and they don't want to include the location, or maybe this project is going to be published in a book in a year. That's important to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that, and I don't know, I was wondering if we should start with this, but I feel like this is a good place to mention it. We want to work with you, and we are open to knowing in advance what the potential constraints on a story are. It doesn't mean that it's going to lead to a no. It could lead to a yes that is actually a different type of story, or it's digital and it's in print, or there's just some other way to handle it, because we know that there are elements of the story that you can't tell, or there are facets of the story that are related to, like Baby mentioned, a book publication date. So a story would need to be told before a book was available. And all of those things actually help us reach the best story to tell about your work. And I love when people keep it real about what is possible. It's like sometimes a client wants to be anonymous, or sometimes a thing is going to be in a book that's coming out in 3 months. And so the story, if we did it in print, would need to appear in the next issue, because that is the next issue or the last one before the book is announced or unveiled. And that's all okay. So I agree, I just want to echo what Bebe said about transparency, because often that actually helps us tell a richer story and gets us excited about jumping on a thing sooner rather than later.
Completely. I feel like, yeah, absolutely. And we'll work together to figure out a way to make it all work for everyone.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then I guess what most people probably want to know is what we actually consider when we're looking at these projects, and what goes on at these meetings when we're reviewing it all.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing we consider is, do we feel like it is a cohesive design? And I know that that is a bit of an ambiguous, the answer to that question is not necessarily straightforward. But what I mean by that is, do we feel like we understand what this designer's perspective is, what their kind of visual perspective is as a designer, and also how what we're seeing, whether it is an individual room or a full home or a backyard or garden, how it responds to the client's needs or concerns or things that they didn't realize that they needed or were concerned with before you entered their lives and were working some magic, how all of those things are related to what the finished product looks like. And so often when I'm wowed by a space, some of it is superficial, of course. Some of it is about the work, the parts of the work that we all love, which is furniture and wallpaper and floor coverings and all of those things. But often those things are the results of conversations you have had with your client about their pets, about their kids, about their work from home situation. And so when Bebe mentioned, having a narrative about the who, the what, and the where, and the why too of these projects is so useful, is because it just allows us to consider those things from a 360-degree viewpoint. But usually we do start with that. We start with, how clear is the design intention in this space? Do we feel like we understand what the goal was, how it supports what we are reading the client's lifestyle is? And that is of paramount importance as we consider what we publish.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say these meetings are a lot of fun. I mean, it's so
yeah.
It's so special and wonderful to get to spend quality time with all of this incredible work. And so often, I think with these meetings, we come out of them with projects that we want to feature, but also, maybe there's a story for the front of the magazine, or a larger story for online. There's so much more that come out of these meetings other than just a project to be featured.
Yeah. And I'm so glad first of all, I'm glad you're having fun in those meetings. I am too. And also, like, I say this basically at the end of every meeting, it is the highlight of my week to look at your work. So send it. We want to look at it. We're assessing it, yes, and that feels kind of, maybe it sounds a little prescriptive or judgy, but we get the honor and the privilege to actually look at the work and to think about it and think about how we can tell those stories. And it is a lot of fun. And it's an hour every week. Often we go over, sometimes it's an hour and a half, but it really is the highlight of my week. It makes me feel just so thrilled to be part of this moment in magazine making and telling design stories.
Yeah, it's the highlight, I think, of what I do, for sure. And I love it. And then down to like the logistical things of what we look at when we get each one of these projects, I think one of the first things that we ask ourselves and each other is this project exclusive to Elle Decor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know that exclusivity has likely come up to, for anybody on this call who has had conversations with us or any of our peers. We like to show things first. We are journalists who write about and think about design, and we want the scoop. So if there is a project that you are finishing and you've not pitched it anywhere else, that is an enticement. We like to feel like you have come to us first with your project, which is a huge honor for us, and also just something exciting that we can share with our readership, whether that's a print readership or a digital readership. And also, it gives us an opportunity to really work with you to mold how that story takes shape. And so, if we know that it ran in a European magazine, that might be okay. Often we say, okay, it ran in a German magazine or it ran in a Nigerian magazine. Has it run in North America? So Canada and the US, has it run in North America? And that question is often a question that will come up and that we end up having conversations about with folks as they submit projects to us.
Yeah. And if it has run somewhere else before, when that happened, I think over the years, and I know we've had this conversation recently with projects, but we've gotten projects that were featured 10 years ago but have been redesigned, and being able to see the transformation or see how someone has reinvented a space is just as interesting.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that is a compelling category unto itself. Just thinking about transformations and how someone's space, either it's, if it's a designer's own space and it's evolved with them, or it's for a client and they have a long-term relationship and they've gone back to a client that they worked with a decade ago to reimagine their space with additional kids, or empty nesters, which we've seen upsizing and downsizing come across our desks. I think that is a really compelling design story as well. So it's something that we keep an eye out for.
Or I've seen some projects, I think we've both seen some projects where people have had to adjust to parents moving in.
Yes, parents moving in, and also people moving in with their parents, and or moving in with parents who are aging and who they're supporting. And also through this pandemic, I think lots of people's living situations changed in ways that surprised them and all of us. And so design solutions to those questions have been coming up, I think, more and more in our conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when we're looking at these projects, we're looking for a whole wide range of talent, always.
Yes, a wide range of talent always, and also a wide range of styles. I don't think I don't think we've talked about style yet in this call, and we all have our own individual likes and dislikes as people living and working in spaces, but we're editors, we're curious, even if we don't necessarily want to turn our living room into a bowling alley. That could be something that's really engaging to see in work that you've done with a client. And obviously that's an extreme example, but I think there are so often things that I see that just delight and fascinate me from my own curiosity as an editor. And so send things that you think, oh, I don't know if that's right. Let us give you feedback and we will do our best to give that feedback clearly and quickly. But we love to see a broad range of interior styles in all of the things that we review.
Yeah, completely. And sometimes it's, we are looking at one issue in particular and there's a certain number of more contemporary and modern projects, and we need something a little more traditional to balance it out. Or we have a lot of colorful, beautiful projects, and we need something a little, more pared back and simple.
Right. Or we have a lot of things on the coast, and we're thinking, okay, well, what's happening in New Orleans? What's happening in Atlanta? What's happening in Chicago? And we think globally. So often we'll say we have a lot of US projects in this issue. Do we have anything in South Africa? Do we have anything in Mexico? And I think that those considerations, it does make it tough because, like we said, we see a lot of work that we love that we just don't have a fit for in print. And that is the tough bit. It's the highlight of our week to be in that meeting often. But it also is tough to know that we have to actually either return something to a designer and say, we don't have a fit for this right now, and just be upfront about that, or say, we love this so much and we'd have to actually hold it for 2022, for example, which is where we are right now in our editorial calendar. So just to give people a sense of the timeline really quickly, we just finished our summer issue, which will be on newsstands next month, early next month, and it will actually be on newsstands until mid-August, which is when our September issue debuts. And so the date on the issue is always a month ahead of the date that it actually arrives on newsstands. And also, that issue is planned months in advance. So we finished our summer issue, but we've been working on some of those stories. Some of those stories had been in our inventory that we were really excited about, and we didn't have a place for them until this summer issue because they felt really summery and there was a pool or there was some other element that made this moment timely for that story. So often it's a yes, but it's a yes and we'll need to hold this until 2022. It doesn't mean we're any less excited about it, but it does mean that we're being really careful about making sure that that story is told at the right time.
Completely. And, going back to speaking about how we look for a lot of geographic diversity in these projects, I think one of the benefits of COVID has been that we are engaging so much more with designers all over the country, all over the world. And I think that helps a lot.
Totally. I mean, it's been a weird time to make a magazine. We're working fully remotely. Bebe and I have met each other 3 times, I think, at this point, in person. But we are in meetings like this one, on a Zoom every day, at least once a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been really nice for me as the new editor also to get to meet so many of you and so many people worldwide through these virtual platforms. So I know we are going to talk about how to build a relationship with an editor, and I feel like that might be a good segue. But
Yeah.
that's part of this moment, is just this ability to meet virtually like this.
Yeah. Well, going back to the projects, I think that we talked about this a little bit already, but always asking if there's a story here. And also, I think one of the things that you often ask is like, is this a first? Is this new? And it's something I admire. And I think it can be seen in the last couple of issues where there have been so many wonderful new stories being told. Yeah. And then I think this is on my mind right now because we're looking at it a lot for our October issue, which is a renovation themed issue. But if your project is a renovation, we want to see the transformation.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see those before photos.
Yeah, send us the mess. We want to see it. We want to see everything down to the studs. I think so often we think about the glamour. We think about the finished product and the beauty of that final image or those final images. But for a renovation themed issue, especially, it is so beneficial to see what the process was, the full trajectory of your design project from beginning to mid renovation to end. And so if you have supplemental material, and that goes for any supplemental material, it could be archival images from the early 20th century of a house that you're rethinking for a client who inherited it from family or bought it recently, that all of that is really useful for us to have.
Completely. And then we're at a huge moment of change in our industry. And I think one of the things that you and I talk about all the time is how can Elle Decor be a part of that? And that comes up so often in these meetings as well.
It does. And, I think that's a pretty broad mandate. How can we be part of these conversations, the conversations that are happening around racial justice, conversations that are happening around the changes that the pandemic has wrought and how we live and how we work and what our workplaces and homes look like.
Right.
Our job is to tell all of these stories through the lens of interiors design and architecture. And so if you feel you have a project or you're working with a philanthropic organization or you have a connection to a nonprofit that's doing great work in the interiors and design space or gardening, we want to hear about that too. I think thinking about the stories that are worthy of being told in the print magazine, online, in expansive ways is what we have all gotten really used to doing as a group internally. And I just want to put that out there if folks have things that they feel would be a good, well suited to that type of storytelling as well.
Yeah. And we want to hear about the stories, what makes this special for you and what you're enthusiastic about with your projects. And I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, agreed. Your enthusiasm is our enthusiasm. It is a contagious kind of thing. And if we feel like we understand what is so exciting about the work that you are submitting to us, we're going to be that much more likely to be considering it for inclusion.
Yeah. Um, I think we covered most of these.
I think
But
so. I see there's one question which we'll get to at the end. I just read the question briefly.
okay. And then, the theme of this conversation, how to build a relationship with an editor. And I think with these projects in particular, like I look at these projects when we are sent a project, I look at that as a conversation starter, something that will start a conversation and build a relationship with a designer, if not career long, then, lifelong. And I think that that's really important. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think because we are in this moment where folks are willing to and able to get on a Zoom from
right.
different time zones, different parts of the country, there's an opportunity in this specific moment to start building relationships that can then hopefully be, in person and face to face, but for now can be just, this type of platform.
Yeah. And with these projects, I mentioned this already a little bit, but if it isn't a feature project that comes out of the project, then maybe there's something for the front of the magazine, or maybe there's a story to be told about something that you're working on later on in the year. And it's sending a project is building a relationship essentially.
Totally. And one other thing I'll add to that too is we're always looking for expert voices to sound off on design, renovation, and interiors,
Yeah.
ideas that we're writing about for other parts of the magazine outside of the center of the magazine where we show whole homes. So it could be that you've sent us a project and that project wasn't a fit for whatever reason, all of the things that we discussed, but we think, oh, that person will really know what advice to give about wall coverings, or that person will have a great soundbite if we're talking about home spas, just any kind of those categories that we feel people are invested in and interested in, that you might have something interesting to say. We always go back to those folks when we're reporting stories, and then you become an expert voice who we turn to for giving quotes. And I think that that is another way to get into the mix of the magazine without necessarily having a full project that's done and ready to be photographed. And the timeline on those projects can be long. So it's also a good thing between projects. You could have recently submitted something that we did a great story on online, but we want to keep in touch because that is all part of building a relationship. And it's
Right.
all part of how we tell design stories in the magazine.
Yeah. Or, we have our One Great Room series. Maybe there's one room that is just a total standout in this project that we're sent. And
Why don't you tell people what that is, since that's happening soon?
One Great Room is our new Instagram series, which is just that, One Great Room, where we will work with a designer or a homeowner to take us on a tour with a video and highlight the elements of this room that make it so special and great. Everything from the wall covering and the art and the furniture, everything, and the story essentially. And that will live on our Instagram and also on our website.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully later this month, maybe just after Memorial Day. We're working on the timing for that, but we're really excited for everybody to see it.
Yeah. And I think our readers will also really appreciate getting a glimpse into what makes these rooms, the special places that they are. So we're really excited about that. And maybe some of you have a One Great Room you want to share.
Yeah. And, I've seen a few questions come in so far about how to submit a project, just like what exactly, who the contacts are. You can always email the two of us, and I'll put our email addresses in the chat box at the end of this, so that folks can have it in writing. But Bebe is the editor. She is the person who is sifting through submissions. I meet with her in a weekly meeting with a few other people. We meet once every 2 weeks, one-on-one. We talk on Slack audio calls and video calls all the time because we are not in the office together. So, if you send things her way, I will eventually see it. And I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, we want to engage with all of you and build wonderful, lasting relationships. So definitely send us an email. Feel free to, suggest a Zoom to me or Asad, you too, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And, we can meet one-on-one, face-to-face.
totally. I'm going to add something that I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I run my own Instagram. People do DM me on Instagram all the time. I have actually come by lots of appointments from people who just have been kind enough and bold enough to DM me on Instagram. And if I see it, because obviously it's like the messages end up in a funny inbox if I'm not following the person or if they're not following me when they message. And I see them, and if I don't see them right away, it might be a couple weeks, it might be a couple months, but I do eventually get to them as I scroll through my own Instagram DMs, and I'm around. So if you DM me, it is highly likely that I will respond. And I'm saying that just to let you know, I'm accessible. There's no like ivory tower. I'm here. I'm happy to talk to people. I've actually had some great beginnings of conversations about projects and things that have just come out of DMs. And then we set up something for me, Bebe, and the designer over Zoom that's a little bit more formal.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if it's not a full home, email us or let us know what you are working on or what's coming down the line. It's always good to think about that. I mean, we work so far in advance. We're already working on, October, November, December, and into 2022. So it's great to know what's down the pipeline.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think, are there any other questions?
Yeah, so there are a few in the chat. I'm going to open this again and see what else is in there. Okay, so there are some in the chat and there are some in the Q&A box. So I'm going to start with the ones that are in the chat. So Abigail Horace asked, how can we get those types of opportunities to be involved in those sound bites and professional advice stories? So again, if you reach out to us with a project, that's just a way in for us to start a conversation about your work. So we get a sense of what your specific focus might be and how you could be useful as our reporters work on stories about various firms that we might be focusing on in a given issue. So that's a great place to start. And Abigail, I don't know if you've been in touch with any of us in the past, but I hope you will be in the future.
For sure.
Alexis Audette asked, and I feel like I'm on like a chat show. Alexis Audette asked, I'm a wallpaper designer. Should I send a submission to you and Bebe for wallpapers, or is there someone else on your team who reviews wall coverings and textiles? This is a fantastic question. So obviously we've been talking about interiors and whole homes and individual rooms, but we do have a style director who heads up our market coverage. Her name is Parker Larson. I'll put a few email addresses in the chat at the end just so that you have them. I think they'd be relevant to anybody. I love a good wall covering, so you can obviously send them to me too, and we'll distribute those emails and those submissions to the right editor if they do come to us.
Yeah.
But yes, we will share that information too.
We will always try and, if we're not the right person for it, connect you with someone who is. So.
Yeah. So
and
there are
vice versa for everyone else too on the team. Yeah.
There are a few questions in the Q&A, and I'm actually going to go from the bottom up. Wilbur Jordan is asking how important publicists or PR firms are in the process of selecting or being selected for publication. That's a really interesting question. We have longstanding healthy relationships with lots of people in public relations. And often they have access to us because we've worked with them for long periods of time. So it's a way to kind of buy into, your working relationship with them is a way to kind of extend your relationship with us through their relationship with us. And that can be really useful because they can frame your stories in ways that they know we are interested in hearing about them. They can stump for you and advocate for you, which is, I imagine, always really useful for every designer.
Yeah.
But I will also say that doesn't dictate whether or not we pick up a story. Just because we love a PR person and we have a really great working relationship with them doesn't mean that that story is any more likely to be picked up. At the end of the day, the story has to be a strong interior story, a strong design story. It has to be falling and coming to us at a moment when we're looking for a story like it, because it's in a specific place or it has a specific aesthetic vision that we think we need in a mix for a certain issue. So all of those things very much outweigh how it came to us or if a specific PR person sent it our way. But that's a great question. I think if you are lucky enough to be able to work with a publicist or a PR rep, you absolutely should do that. Because they often have connections with us as editors, with our peers at other magazines, and they're able to really grease the wheels on some of those interactions.
Completely. And, you know, yeah, completely. Yeah.
And there was a follow-up from that person. How important is the level of work? And I'm reading two questions at once. Is the level of work the only criteria for submitting projects? May a brand newbie submit? Absolutely, a brand newbie may and should and please do submit.
Yes.
We are always, always, always talking about how much we'd love to establish relationships with emerging talent. So if you feel like you want to go for it, do it.
We would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see here, the window closed. There's a question here. I want to know how an artist can get their artwork in front of designers to consider hanging in a client's space. That's a question for the people who are on the call. I mean, my suggestion would be to reach out to a few designers who you feel the artist's work gels with. And it's like, okay, there's abstraction in this work or color fields or a great sense of pattern or scale. And I think it would go well with the work that this designer does. I would go to that designer's website and just reach out to them on the form or through the email address on their site.
Completely.
I mean, anything else you would add to that, Bebe?
No, but it makes me think about our editorial calendar, which I haven't mentioned, and is available on our website, which I thought of this because we have in the past had an art issue, and if you're interested in the upcoming themes for the issues, definitely take a look at the editorial calendar on the website. It's available in the media kit online. So
yeah, that's a great idea. Sarah Barnes is asking, do your social media and web-based content tie directly into the print articles, or is there additional content opportunity that is not necessarily in the printed magazine? And yes, so if I understand the question correctly, yes, the website and everything that happens on eldecor.com is very much related to what we do in the print magazine. Often we have just limited page space in the print magazine, and so we're able to actually flesh out or add additional imagery to a story online. And that is really, really great. That's a great thing about digital content in general. But often the thing on the website stands on its own 2 feet and is not related to anything we did in the print magazine. So often if we're between issues, as we are right now, but something is really timely and we want to cover it, we'll cover it on eldecor.com. Because look, your potential clients, our readers, all of those people are encountering so much of what we do, whether it is print or digital exclusive, through Instagram, through eldecor.com, on Pinterest, anywhere that they meet Eldecor. So they don't necessarily have that same hierarchy in their mind about where they saw a thing or how important a thing is. And for us, print and digital, equally important.
yeah.
Very different platforms with different perspectives and different opportunities for showing and displaying content, but equally important. And we always talk about digital inclusion as, wouldn't it be so great to blow this story out and show tons of images and make it interactive, make it shoppable, make somebody feel like it actually has a bit of an advice and service angle to it. So great question, Sarah, and I hope that answers it. Okay, there are a few, and I want to get to the ones that are not repeating things we've talked about. Kia McSwain is asking, is there a checklist when pitching for print versus digital? Bebe, how would you answer that question?
I would say, you know, we have these projects meetings and we look at all of the projects for both print and digital at the same time. So we're all often thinking about the same things, but I don't know. I think it's pretty much the same, really.
Yeah, the short answer is no. You know, there's no checklist for thinking, okay, is this right for print or right for digital? It has so much to do with the mix of projects we are looking at, the mix of submissions we're considering for given issues. So I don't know, in the interest of full transparency, we're working on future, fall issues right now, and we're thinking about geographic diversity right now. We're
Right.
thinking, okay, we have projects in California and New York, and we've got 2 in New York, and that's, so that means we can't have any more in New York. We need to think about some of these other locations that we'd really love to see projects from, or we need to move this New York project into a future issue because that will make space for other US projects, other US cities, when
Yeah.
we know we need to also go global and we need to think, okay, we had our Italy issue, which was our May issue. Our May issue was Italy themed. So like, let's give Italy a break. And you'll see that in our summer issue, we don't go to Italy because we just spent a whole issue there. So we're thinking about all of those things and how the elements of all of those issues, how they interplay. And really it's more complex than thinking, okay, is this right for print or is this right for digital? So much as, do we want to tell this story? And what is the best platform to tell the story with the constraints that we do have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there are some great questions in here and there are a lot coming in, which I so appreciate. Let's see. K. Jillian Davenport asked, when you mentioned exclusivity and being the first to feature design photos, is that also applicable to us posting or sharing our design photos on social media prior to you featuring it? This is a fantastic question. Baby, I'm gonna let you take that one too.
I don't think it's a deal breaker, but I think that we obviously prefer to be the first ones to share and tell this beautiful, incredible story.
Yeah, and look too, if you've been posting process shots, I know we talked about renovations and wanting to see things down to the studs and all of that. If you're posting process shots on your Instagram, that's great. That's fine. I think if you had your project professionally shot and posted those photos on Instagram and then submitted those photos to us, that's a bit more of a conflict because we want to be able to show professional photography for the first time to our audiences.
Right.
But so many of the projects that we actually end up going after are ones where we get a little glimpse on social media and it whets our appetite. So there is some strategic benefit to posting just a little hint for us to get excited about.
Also, we understand that this is your business, and social media is a big part of that. So
Totally. All right, there are a few other questions. Let's see what we can get to. Any advice for photographers trying to help their clients be featured? Thank you. So this comes from Ariel Camillo Photography. And Ariel, I assume you're talking about your designer clients. And if you want to clarify, if that's not right, you can clarify in the chat box or in the Q&A box. But if you are working with designers and they're your client, like you're photographing a designer space and you want to help them get their project into the magazine, we can also, and I'll leave this person's email address in the chat at the end of this too, our photo editor, David Murphy. So often things will come to him, from photographers directly, and he shares those projects with Bebe and with me as well to review. So it could be that there is a great project kind of waiting in the wings that you photographed, and we want to pick up and license those photos to use in the print magazine or online.
Yeah, and we get projects from photographers, also from homeowners, and obviously, of course, designers. Like, I don't think our process is in the way that we look at all of this. We don't only work with designers on it. Projects come in every way.
From every corner, exactly. Yeah. Michael London asked, does international include Canada? So I'm assuming that question is about exclusivity and where things have appeared. If something appeared in a Canadian magazine, I'd want to know which magazine. Like, was it the Globe and Mail? Like, was it, the magazine of the Globe and Mail, which is like a very widely read newspaper? Like, that might be a conflict. I often say, and we often ask for North American exclusivity, which would include Canada. But we like to keep it roomy. So we'll obviously think about things and consider things on a case-by-case basis as well. Good question. Lisa Moon asked, if there is a project that wasn't selected for a given issue, do you revisit those projects or should they be resubmitted? That's a fantastic question. Baby, I'm gonna let you take that one since you organize our inventory.
I think that going back to what we talked about a little bit before, when we look at these projects, we're looking at them, of course, for features, but also like thinking about other places down the line if there's a fit for them there or online. Absolutely stay in touch about projects and let us know what you're up to, for sure. And you're welcome to resubmit it, because it might just be that maybe it's not a right geographic fit for what we're looking for, and perhaps there's opportunity later. So
Totally. Yeah. All of that is spot on. And it doesn't hurt to resubmit it.
yeah,
If it's a concise email with all the information you feel we need to know, we are grateful to just have it in front of us again. Especially if you submitted it and we told you that it wasn't a fit for that specific time. If we're clear about it being a timing issue, we're
mhm.
happy to look at it again.
And sometimes people
Um,
send projects and they get, they've gone back and they've done a few more rooms and they want to make sure that we see those too.
right. Or they've added art, or
Yeah,
there are new floor coverings, or whatever it might be. And we're really happy to see those updates as well.
yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. And um, the question is, how important are events at places like High Point, ADAC, and show houses to editors and magazine staff? Are they relevant to you and the work you do? If so, how? And I wanted to end on this question because events are going to be roaring back in whatever shape, masked, temperatures taken at the door, all of it. And I think that that is a question that probably a lot of people on this call have. Baby, you start and then I can jump in after.
I think they're important, but for me, thinking about projects, going back to what we touched on a little bit before, one of the, I guess, upsides I would say to COVID is, Zoom and being able to engage with people who you might not run into at any of these markets, and starting a relationship and a conversation that way. So
Right. Because look, not everybody can afford to go zipping from design event to design event. And some people, beyond affording it or not, just don't want to. And I think the business models that have emerged in the pandemic, but also that have just been accelerated by the pandemic, because a lot of this digital virtual work had been happening already, means that we get to decide how and where and when we interact with folks. It is nice to be meeting people in person at a High Point or at a show house or at Salone in Milan, but those events, much as we may miss them, we've been able to work in this way, and I feel like it has led to a democratization that I don't want to lose. I want to be able to keep talking to people that I wouldn't meet otherwise, because that's how we actually get in front of this kind of group. All of the people that are on this call, I'm sure y'all are all over the country and the world, and it is great to be able to get in front of you and be able to chat a little bit and hear your questions. So thank you for submitting so many of them.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to meet everyone soon.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Hearing from you and seeing your work. So
yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I'm going to put the email addresses in the chat now. Okay, so I'm typing mine. Now I'm typing Bebe's. This is our market editor. I'm going to put her official title so that it's in here. And I think she's Parker.Larson. All of the naming conventions are different, but I have everybody's email address memorized. And then our photo editor is David Murphy. And he is D. Murphy. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Here we go. I'm going to add David, and then that's it. Okay. They're all in the chat. So copy and paste, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for your time. And we'll hopefully talk really soon.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.